France's President, meanwhile, Emmanuel Macron, and German Chancellor Angela Merkel visiting President Trump this week. They're looking to avert punitive tariffs on European steel and aluminium. It's a critical issue for both countries and, of course, for the broader European Union. We're joined now exclusively by David O'Sullivan, European Union Ambassador to the United States. And thanks for joining.
My pleasure.
Do you have any indication of whether President Trump will renew the waiver on these tariffs on Tuesday?
No, we don't yet know what the president's decision will be. We have been engaged in, I think, helpful discussions on the issue, but at the end of the day, this is something which will be decided by the president, and we don't yet know what that decision will be.
If you had the president's ear for a few minutes, and clearly the French president and the German chancellor are speaking to him about this, what would you say to him?
Well, I think our message has been the same from the very beginning. We don't believe that European exports of steel and aluminium, as we call it, pose a threat to American national security or even to the American economy. These are largely high-value, frequently very specialized exports which feed into the American production process. And we think putting tariffs on those is to miss the point of the problem, which is really overcapacity in China. And we're more than willing and able to work with the administration on addressing that core problem, which is common to the United States and the European Union.
I've been reading some of the economists' notes, and they've been calculating the cost of all of this. And one, UniCredit's economy department says that the cost would amount to maybe 8.4 billion euros, but 70% of that would be borne by Germany. What do you say when individual companies go to try to lobby the US president, given that it's a trading bloc, right?
Yes, I mean, the European Union trades, exports and imports as a whole. Of course, at the end of the day, our companies live in a physical district, which is in a country, but we are a single market, a customs union. We're the largest single market in the world. We're the largest exporter and largest importer in the world. We're the largest export destination for 44 of 50 US states. So we're a hugely important trading partner for the United States. And I think this is what needs to be thought through in any situation which might impose unfair tariffs, because we would ultimately be damaging each other.
Exactly. So if the president were to not renew, the waiver, for example, would it be each country in the European Union for itself when it comes to making a bilateral deal with the US?
No, member states of the European Union can no longer negotiate on trade matters. This is done exclusively by the European Commission on behalf of our member states and, of course, in close consultation with them. So anything which is imposed will impact the entire European Union.
Yeah, and yet the French president and the German chancellor do seem to have sort of one-on-one time with the president. Is that fair?
No, they are speaking on behalf of Europe as a whole. President Macron's messages, I wasn't in the private meetings, but I had the honor of being at Congress when he made his joint address, and what he said on the issue reflects absolutely the common European position, and I've no doubt that Chancellor Merkel will make the same presentation to the president. So it's important that all our European leaders avail of any opportunity of FaceTime with the president to make the point. We've had the Baltic states were through recently. The Irish Taoiseach was here for St. Patrick's Day, and I think there's a common message from all European leaders on this trade issue.
It's interesting what you say there, Ambassador, that Macron was speaking for Europe as a whole, because when it comes to Iran, I know there's limitations to what you can say here. He did seemingly surprise some by putting forward this four-pronged approach. It seemed as if what he was suggesting hadn't entirely been cleared or discussed with his fellow EU leaders. Is that the case?
No, I think, again, I had the honor of listening to what President Macron said on the issue in his address to the Joint Houses of Congress, and it was perfectly consistent with the EU position, which is that we stand by the Iran nuclear deal. We believe it is an indispensable element of European security and global security. We do not believe that that deal can be changed or should be changed. And the French president said very clearly that France would not leave that deal. But there are other issues. We know there are other problems with Iran, and he listed those. And we are more than willing to work with this administration and with the international community to address those problems. So I think there is really a remarkable consistency of messaging coming from Europe on this issue.
How do you think Macron did in persuading the president, ambassador, on the issue of Iran? He clearly admitted that he thinks Trump will pull the US out of that deal, not just Iran, but on the other issues where there are some disagreements, such as trade. Clearly, Macron was unable to persuade him to stay in the Paris Climate Accord. So for all their closeness, it seems he doesn't actually have that much influence over Trump.
Well, I don't think you can judge a meeting by the immediate outcomes. President Macron, I think, was very frank in the differences which exist between the EU and President Trump on some of these issues. He made his point. I'm sure that will be reinforced by Chancellor Merkel. But of course, it is ultimately up to the President of the United States to take his decision. And we listen to what he says on these issues. And I agree. I don't think he's yet persuaded. We will continue to try to make the case because we believe the world functions better when the EU and the United States are on the same page and working in the same direction.
Yeah, Ambassador, on Iran, as we're on the subject of geopolitics, let's throw in a question on Korea. The North Korean, South Korean leaders, of course, meet tomorrow ahead of the Trump-North Korea leaders meeting. Are you looking ahead to the Trump-Kim Jong-un meeting and what possibly can be attained from that? What's, from your standpoint, the best case scenario when it comes to that meeting?
Well, I think it will be up to the American president to decide how he wants to handle the meeting. I think what the international community wants and the European Union wants is to start a process of the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And in this regard, I would refer back to Iran, because I think the non-proliferation agreement we have with Iran is probably the single best functioning model of how you can denuclearize a country which has a nuclear program. And we believe it would be important to keep the Iran deal in place as a demonstration of what you can achieve, and some kind of similar approach is going to have to be taken over time with North Korea to get to put an end to their nuclear program and to denuclearize the peninsula, which is the common objective I think we all share.
Do you have any information on whether a meeting might take place on European soil, Sweden hearing, for example?
I have no insight on that,
well,
I'm afraid.
Let's get back to trade, because that's your major area of expertise. When it comes to trade, do you have any idea about what Tim Cook and the President might have been speaking about yesterday, and how tech trade and tech taxes might impact European companies?
Well, we have trade in the tech industry is a big item between us, and America actually has a considerable surplus in this area of tech services with Europe, and we welcome very much the presence of the big American tech companies in Europe. There are issues around taxation. There are, I think, real problems of taxing the tech economy because its lack of bricks and mortar presence, which is normally the criterion used for imposing taxes. The European Commission has come forward with some ideas as to how we might address that. It will be discussed by the Member States and by the European Parliament, and we will see how we take this forward in a way that addresses the problem, but at the same time does not stifle the innovation and the creativity of this industry, which we know is vital also for the EU.
Can I ask you, Ambassador, how do you improve things like EU integration with the spectre of Brexit hanging in the background? Does Brexit need to get resolved first before the EU continues on with, the strategy of integrating more countries even into the zone? I
think the Brexit negotiation is on its own track. We need to finish that by October so that the necessary ratifications can take place. But I think the interesting thing, Vonnie, is that the response in the rest of Europe has actually been increased support for the European Union, and the 27 are absolutely determined to continue on their path of progressive integration, particularly in the economic and monetary area, which needs additional work. And I think that work is going to continue. And of course, we have held out the prospect of the future accession of the Western Balkan countries, not in the immediate future, but in the next 7 or 8 years. So this process will also continue. So we're very disappointed about Brexit. We wish the British were not leaving, but this is their decision. And the rest of us, I think, are very, very firmly committed to the benefits which European integration brings to our citizens.